The Supreme Court ruled that former President Donald Trump can remain on the presidential ballot in Colorado, with implications for every other state challenging his name on the ballots. The justices ruled unanimously to reverse the Colorado Supreme Court decision. That court had disqualified the former president from the 2024 election for his alleged role in the January 6th Capitol riots. The ruling put an end to several other states' efforts to keep Trump off their own ballots. He praised the Supreme Court following the decision, saying this.
I want to start by thanking the Supreme Court for its unanimous decision today. It was a very important decision. We're very well crafted, and I think it will go a long way toward bringing our country together, which our country needs.
CBS News campaign reporter and attorney Katrina Kaufman and CBS chief Washington correspondent Major Garrett are both here with me in Studio 57. Great to have you both. You've had quite the morning. Katrina, let's start with you. What were the factors in this case? Remind us.
Well, 3 states had disqualified Trump from the ballot: Maine, Colorado, and just last week, Illinois. And so the Supreme Court saw that they really had to step in and give the nation an answer on this. And that answer was that states don't have the power to enforce Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, which was the clause of the Constitution that he had been disqualified under. Notably, they did not make any ruling on whether or not Trump had engaged in insurrection. So the finding in 3 states that he did, in fact, engage in insurrection still stands to an extent. I also thought it was notable that there was a split. The decision was unanimous, but there were concurring opinions by a number of justices, and the split was between men and women, which I thought was striking as well.
Now, one thing, Major, that I keep thinking about is there's no conviction, right? There's no decision by a court that, in fact, Trump was an insurrectionist. So it was kind of a far cry to think that the court would rule otherwise, right?
When the Supreme Court in Colorado handed down its decision, 3 of the dissenting justices on the Colorado Supreme Court, in one way or another, raised that issue. One of them very strenuously and said, we don't have a finding of fact about an insurrection, or that the former president of the United States was engaged in an insurrection. Absent that finding of fact, we can't wade into this. But the majority of the Colorado Supreme Court decided, no, we can. The Supreme Court did not handle that, did not address whether or not. But for the larger political conversation, some Americans believe January 6, 2021 was an insurrection. Many Trump supporters do not. This is going to now be adjudicated the old-fashioned way, politically, at the ballot box. Right. And the Supreme Court, in this intervention, basically said, we are going to solve one underlying issue, which strikes to what the court didn't say was fair, but had an implication of fairness. Look, he's got to be on all the ballots. That is something that, for the political system to adjudicate this, has to happen. He can't be on some ballots and off others for this to be settled once and for all. So in the political sphere, the court said politics will handle this, but for politics to carry this out, he's got to be on all the ballots.
So aside from the politics, let's go back to the law, because there are multiple cases. Katrina, if Trump is convicted of election interference, does that change his name on the ballot at all, or does that change the equation?
It doesn't change his name on the ballot, but obviously that would be a very consequential ruling.
And one of the things that's really important about that question, Lilia, is even Jack Smith, the special prosecutor, didn't allege insurrection.
Right.
Didn't charge. He's charged with things related to January 6th, official proceeding, conspiracy, and things like that. So even when there is a federal case against the former president, it's not on insurrection. And the court knows that. Didn't wade into that, but knows that's part of the atmospherics around this. It doesn't change that case. What will possibly change that case is oral arguments on April 22nd before the Supreme Court on the question of absolute immunity. And on the heels of this decision today, the former president said that's the next big one, because no president can function without absolute immunity. The history of our country argues against that rather aggressively. Every president before President Trump operated fully without the sense of absolute legal immunity. And we should also note that former President Nixon, when he resigned from office, accepted the pardon from Gerald Ford, his successor as the President of the United States, because he feared legitimately he would be indicted for actions undertaken while President of the United States. So Richard Nixon did not believe in absolute immunity, and no one tested the bounds of presidential power legally in this country more than Richard Nixon.
I mean, if he accepted a pardon, it means there is no assumption of immunity.
Why are you accepting a pardon? Because you don't want to be indicted and convicted.
So what is the message to voters from this? And more importantly, I think, what do you expect will happen with the next case?
So the next case will be heard before the Supreme Court. I think the Supreme Court will take a very aggressively skeptical, to put it mildly, attitude toward the assertion of absolute immunity for any president, President Trump or any president. On this one, the country will say, okay, now we know. He's going to be on the ballot, and this will not take January 6, 2021 off the conversational spectrum.
Right.
It will keep it front and center, but at least the courts have said, we're going to do this politically, and for the former president, he also loses something that he likes to use, which is all the justice system is against me. We can't say that, at least in this case now.
This time it worked.
This time it worked, and it worked with liberal justices, so-called, and conservative justices, so-called.
Major Garrett and Katrina Kaufman, thank you both so much.
Thank you.